What's up everyone? If you're here and you're at this video, likely the title's drawing you in or the thumbnail or something like that. This is gonna be a video for beginners, people who are trying to get into killer, people that are already into killer that might be struggling a little bit to find their feet, who are after some tips, some quick advice, some good tips to sort of keep in mind while they're playing the game and things to just keep an eye on whilst trying to get into the role of killer. As we all know, the role of killer is the hardest role in the game. I don't think you'll find anyone that disputes that. I don't think you'll find survivors that dispute that. The role of killer is the hardest one to play in the game. It's the hardest one to get into. It's the one with the most pressure on your shoulders, the most stress and the most worry, and people find it genuinely massively anxiety inducing. Like there's a big weight on your shoulders when you search as killer and when you establish a match as killer, and when you're against those 4 survivors, there's a really big weight on your shoulder. And hopefully with these tips that I give you today, you'll be able to shake some of that weight off and maybe put those things to the back of your mind and just play and get better and improve your overall game. Before we get into these guys, make sure to like and subscribe. Make sure to click that thumbs up on the video. It really helps the YouTube algorithm. Let me know in the comments down below if you have any tips of your own for people getting into killer gameplay, or if you would agree or disagree, or maybe have like a slightly different take on anything that I go over in this video. I'd love to hear that. Let's get into it. Alright guys, this list is basically taking into account and assuming that you've got a killer you're comfortable with right now, you've got a killer that you're enjoying playing. I would always recommend to find a killer that you enjoy, not one that you go, oh, this is the most powerful killer in the game. You need to kind of find one that is, you know, you do well with, but you enjoy playing. Find a killer that you like the look of, you like the feel of, you like the idea of, and get into that sort of gimmick, right? And just play into that killer and use that killer. Now, you might be accidentally using a B or C tier killer, but you're still going to get all the necessary and vital experience of the killer gameplay and the whole sort of what happens and how the survivors are kind of deal from that killer. There's some S tier killers that you could probably commit to first, and I would argue it's very good to do so because the skill ceiling is very high, and killers like Nurse and Blight and Billy, like Hillbilly, they take a lot of muscle memory, a lot of hours to get into, and dedicated play over and over again to master their like controls and their movement kind of thing. So you could do that if you want to put aside your personal feelings and attachments and one you enjoy and just go in for the hardest killer to play. It will reap the most reward, but you might find yourself just being bored. You might find yourself feeling unfulfilled even when you're winning. It's kind of weird. When I win games as Nurse, I don't know, it just doesn't feel the same as when I win a game as like Ghostface or something, you know? Maybe it's because Ghostface is weaker and there's more achievement. Maybe it's because Ghostface is Ghostface from Scream. It's just cool being that character, and it's cool doing those Mories and stuff, you know? There's something to be said for playing a killer that you find fun, you like the idea of, and you enjoy the character and the ability to be that person. I think really makes the game a lot more enjoyable and a lot more tolerable when you're losing too, you know? So yeah, find a character, select that character, settle in, search for a game, and take these tips on board with you while you're playing killer on Dead by Daylight. Okay, so tip number 1, and this is gonna sound really, really silly, just relax. It's the core groundwork for getting into killer is you have to play relaxed. You have to be relaxed. You have to not worry about what survivors are going to think about your gameplay. You have to not worry about getting the perfect result. Don't worry about how many kills you get. Don't worry about, you know, messing up, making mistakes, all that kind of stuff. Sounds silly because obviously to get better, you're going to have to worry about making mistakes, right? You want to improve that game and get better and not make those mistakes anymore. But for the first, like, or at least for a period of time, I would always suggest to somebody to just play fully zen. And I don't mean go into the game and be a friendly killer and farm and try and not kill people, or, you know, tell yourself in the game, hey, look, I'm not trying to kill people, I'm just a friendly killer. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just play the game. A lot of times you can be in some scenarios where mechanically there's just not much else you can do, right? Like, especially if you're first starting too, whether it's your perks, whether it's the perks that you have available, whether it's the add-ons that you don't have, whether it's the build combo you've gotten wrong and it's not very good synergy across the perks, well, then you're relying on the survivors, what builds they're running, what perks they have, the RNG of if they're a Swift or not. You're relying on if their build ends up countering yours quite well. You're relying on if they're going to gen rush. You're relying on if they're going to be very efficient. There's so many different things that mechanically aren't actually in your control. And it feels like people play killer and they go into the game and believe, okay, everything's mechanically in my control. I'm in control here. This is my game and everything's going wrong. It's because I suck. A lot of time it's not actually true. A lot of time there's a big mechanical drawback and things mechanically completely out of your control. So stop worrying about all of that. All you need to worry about is playing the game, getting experience, getting kills where you can, and go into the next game. And that's all there really is to it. Number one, relax. Just play the game. Don't worry about the result. Don't worry about the number of kills. Just play the game. A lot of people will go and watch killers on Twitch and they'll see them doing all these things, and they'll see them doing these things somewhat casually, somewhat on muscle memory, somewhat relaxed, and sort of not looking like they're trying very hard, right? And they say, oh, that kind of looks easy. I'll play a bit of killer. And then they play killer and they get flabbergasted. They get struck by this crazy shock of, well, this is really hard. The thing people don't remember is the difference from a player with 40 hours in the game to 500 hours is massive. The difference from a player who has 500 hours to a player who has 1,000 hours is also massive. Like, it doesn't, 500 to 700 to 800 doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a 300-hour difference is a lot of difference, right? It's crazy. That's a lot of time played, and time played in any game, experience in any game over a period of time is massive. It constitutes to a lot more game awareness, a lot more game sense. You've seen a lot more plays and tactics and things happen that this other person hasn't seen. So if you're watching a killer that has 3,000, 4,000 hours, don't expect to be doing exactly the same things as they're doing and exactly the same results, because it's not. They've been through the period of just playing the game. They've collected experience. They've collected experiences and game knowledge, all that stuff coming up. So you need to just focus on that for a little bit, I would say. And that brings me swiftly to point number 2. Now, being that we are relaxing, and I say don't worry about the kills, don't worry about, objectives, don't worry about, winning the game. I would say inside of a game, sometimes, again, you're going to come up against a really savage, efficient team of survivors. The best thing to do here, when you notice a game isn't going very well, is to make your own objective. Now, that objective might be to, okay, I'm going to commit to this chase at Shack, and I'm going to see what I can do at Shack, see if I can bait this guy, see if I can mind game this person, see if I can run it a little bit better this time. What else can I do? Maybe that's your objective, right? You focus on, hey, I'm going to practice Shack in this chase. Fuck it, These gens are going to get done, the gates are going to get powered, but hey, if I can get this guy down, I'm feeling good. You might be playing Nurse or a killer of that nature, and you might go, hey man, let me see if I can, just do some better blink attacks here. Maybe if I can see what I can do, see how the person, maybe I'll hold my second blink charge and see how this person responds. Just in a game where you are probably going to lose and you can kind of feel you're not doing very well at the start, just make your own objective like that. Focus on your own mission. A lot of time, for a while, my mission generally ends up being, okay, look, I've put up a bad chase. I need to get someone dead. This guy's dying. And this is where you come towards camping or tunneling, right? The illegal, vilified activity. A lot of the time it's just, look, if I've noticed this guy's really good in chases, and that person does want you to continue to chase them. They're happy that they're distracting you while the generators are getting done. But if you tell yourself, like, instead of putting the pressure on yourself, like, oh my god, I'm chasing this guy and the gens are getting done, the problem you face there is, because you're not very confident chasing that guy, they notice that. So when you move away to go and sort the gens out, that person will start harassing you. They'll bully, they'll body block, they'll flashlight. They may or may not get away with it, and that at some point you can actually transition your game plan into dealing with that, like getting experience dealing with that harassment. But sometimes it's just better to get somebody dead. Sometimes I'll just overcommit to a guy that's really good in the chase for my own personal pride and sense of achievement. I'm like, look, this guy's really good at looping. He's very aware, very good at reacting to things. I'd love to get this guy down. It'll feel good. That'll be my objective for the game, to get this guy dead, And it sounds malicious. Some people turn it malicious, some people turn it personal and be like, this fucking guy, I'm gonna make sure he fucking dies, and they turn it like personal. For me, it's somewhat personal in a sense that I notice he's a good player. And if you notice they're a good player doing very well in the chases, you can either leave them and go and try and find a player who is arguably not as good at chasing or not as good at looping, or you could just see how well you do versus this clearly good player, right? Like, see if you can get him down, see if you can get him on a hook, see if you can camp or tunnel and put pressure on the other survivors to come and save, and see if you can make something of it. To that point, I will say, as far as a strategical standpoint and as far as a game winning standpoint, it is always better that if you notice somebody is generally like really experienced at looping and seemingly is not making any mistakes whatsoever, right? Regardless of whether or not you think they're sus and they might be cheating or something, or regardless of whether you think they're just a really good player and they're just perfectly moving and you just cannot bait them, you cannot mind game them, no matter what you try, they just seem to be on one step ahead of you all the time. Strategically and from a game winning standpoint, it is always better to leave that person and go and pressure another generator and find another survivor to chase, because the odds are, sometimes it can happen where that survivor is as good as the person you chase, but odds are usually they're not as good, or because you catch them off guard, you can sometimes get a first hit and then you're in a better position than you actually were in the other chase, and that chase was just a big time sink that wasn't going to get you anywhere as far as the game winning result goes. So it is better strategically to drop chase and go elsewhere, but we're talking about here tips for beginner killers that are just getting started or are very, very green and maybe struggling a little bit. What will happen is, if you just immediately start playing killer and you get into a chase that you find kind of difficult and you dip and go somewhere else, you might just get into another chase that you find kind of difficult and you go, oh, well, I'll go somewhere else. And you get into another chase that's kind of difficult. The gens go, the survivors leave, you get no experience. You don't grow, you don't improve, nothing happens. So this is why a lot of people find it kind of controversial or silly of me to suggest committing to chases that arguably are going to lose you the game. It sounds silly, but the thing is, you're building on a foundation of just bit by bit, right? Like brick by brick kind of thing. You're getting that chase experience versus a very good survivor. Sure, you can make a private match and invite a friend. It's never the same. Practicing a private match, there's definitely something to it, but it's never the same as a real game, and it sounds silly to go into a real game to practice, right? But that's where your experience is going to come from. So why then would I say, if we are strategically better off leaving a powerful chase, a good chase, a strong chaser, a strong survivor, and going elsewhere, if we're strategically better off doing that for the game-winning condition, why am I saying commit to the chase? It's experience. Experience versus another human who has stakes, who feels the weight of their actions, who feels responsibility if they do get hit early that may cause them to panic. It may cause them to trigger something emotionally that makes them make a mistake, and they may not. And if they don't, all you've got there when you do lose the game, instead of just going chase to chase to chase without committing for too long and keep trying to go and kick gens and stuff like that, what you're building is experience. You're building game experience. And when you perform each loop, you can go, okay, next time maybe I'll try this, next time maybe I'll try that. Mechanically, the next game, you might get a team that are pretty much a bit more on your level, or maybe below, and your first chase goes a lot quicker, and you could play that game out like a regular game and care about the game result if you want. But my point is, don't care about every game. When you start playing killer, you're not going to win every game. You're just not going to. Which brings me on to point 3, and the mistake a lot of new killers make. Don't blame other people. Don't blame other factors for victories and defeats. A lot of people get used to doing this as a survivor. A lot of people are still doing this as a survivor player with over 1,000+ hours, stuff like that. Don't ever. Even though sometimes it's nice to, and sometimes it might feel right, it might feel like you're justified in blaming that thing. Don't do it. Actively refrain. Anytime you lose, actively refrain from trying to look at why the survivors had an advantage, what happened, why is it their fault, right? Always look at it of what could I have done better. Sometimes, again, mechanically, the answer always being literally nothing is not on the table too much. There's always a little something you could do different. Maybe not that's going to change the outcome of the match, but just always look for those little moments of what could I have done different. Always look for those. And that's what I mean about eventually, when you win, you're going to come up against higher level survivors, people that are going to be more efficient, more on top of gens, that you're going to start seeing body blocking, hook saves, hook sabotaging, flashlight saves, all those kind of plays are going to start to seep in. They're going to start to leak in. A lot of people's natural response to that, because they've been playing in a very relaxed situation where they're against lower level survivors and the games have been relatively okay, the response to that is usually fucking bully squad, fucking Swift. Look at me, I'm against a Swift, I'm against a bully squad. Oh, this is disgusting, this is OP, unbalanced, oh, dead hard this, dead hard that, right? It's easy to just blame all that and go, well, I just went against a bully squad, they're just assholes, they're just toxic behavior, teabagging, enjoying their win. How dare they enjoy their victory, you know, I'm not having a good time. It's easy to do that. But what you need to realize is they're not a bully squad, they're not, you just ran into a toxic squad. You just ran into better survivors, more efficient survivors. But while you've been doing that, you've been enjoying easy breezy games and you've not collected all this experience against these survivors because you've not been playing against them. So instead of being in a game where you're feeling a bit overwhelmed because they seem to be doing very well, they're body blocking, they're saving, again, use it as a chance for experience. Use it as a chance for reads. Look at what happens when you go to pick someone up. If it happens, you know, the first time, look at what happened, look at the timing of it, look at where they came from. You'll start getting used to looking out for those scenarios being about to happen and how to counter them or get yourself out of them. When you're against a squad that are doing well, don't get emotional, don't get angry, don't let it affect you, don't let it upset you. Sometimes you can only do so much. You can only do mechanically as much as you can, and you can only do as much as your game experience and game level and game skill at this current point in time will allow. If it's not good enough, that's unfortunate. You just came up against a team that are more efficient than you, maybe have more hours in the game, maybe have a much higher level teammate on their team that is helping them out and doing well, and you might not have the best build on to deal with how fast those gens are going. It is what it is. You shrug it off. Again, make your own objective in the game, whether it's to notice how much better you ran a certain loop, whether it's to notice how much less you missed your melee hits, whether it's to notice how little you got flashlight blinded, you know, that kind of stuff. Just take what you can from the game, shrug it off, and move on to the next game, and take that experience. And point number 4, you know, bleeds into point number 3, really. Again, I do want to reiterate, don't blame other people. There's always something you can blame other people for, be it dead hard, the game plan they used, the saves that they did. Stop calling things toxic. Stop saying what they're doing is toxic or bullying. They're not. They're just being altruistic. They're saving their friend in any means necessary. And when they're waiting out the end game and celebrating at the gate and teabagging, they're just celebrating and basking in the glory of their victory, which should motivate you as killer to get to a point where you can put the survivors on the floor and bask in the glory of your own victory. And that's the ideal goal, right? To get good enough to put that back in on the survivor side. So survivors will often be very quick to blame something you did for their loss. They'll blame a perk that you used. They'll blame a tactic that you used, a strategy you employed. Chief among them would be camping, tunneling, or slugging, right? Or even to an extent body blocking. You could body block quite well as a killer situationally and use it to your advantage. Survivors will body block to no end. With no questions asked, they will body block the killer, right? Use it to your advantage too, and they will blame that. They will blame that as the reason for their loss rather than the mistakes they made. The killer is very reliant on mistakes survivors make. One way you can get survivors to make mistakes is psychologically affecting their emotions and how they're playing, psychologically affecting their gameplay. The survivors have the ability to teabag, they have the ability to click the flashlights, they have the ability to taunt, tell you to bring it or point or whatever. They have those resources. They're in the game for a reason. Behavior have never taken them out. They've never really deleted that possibility. They're in the game for a reason. They exist as a psychological warfare strategy. The killer doesn't have much of that. The killer can nod their head, shake their head. That's kind of it, right? So we start looking at, okay, what else emotionally affects survivors and gets them to play a little bit different, a little bit hot-headed. Camping and tunneling, slugging, hitting on hook. Chief among them. Now you might hear that, and as a survivor player, maybe switching over to killer player, you might hear, wow, that's toxic. That sounds terrible. Think about how it affects you emotionally when you're playing, when that happens. It does. It just affects survivors, man. Like, they always want to affect the killer as much as possible emotionally. They always want to do it, and they will take any opportunity to do it, and it makes you feel terrible. You think they feel guilty about it? They don't. So what you need to do is, the biggest tip for number 4 will be, don't shun or disregard the power of a strategic camp or tunnel, like in sort of midway through the game. Now, the argument is, oh, face camping's terrible, camping at 5 gens. Oh, wow, I'm okay with you camping at 1 or 2 gens. They've always got this line of, okay, it's fine with you camping at 1 or 2 gens, but I don't like that you camped at 5 gens, whatever. Camp whenever you want. Whenever you think it'll be beneficial to you, whenever you think it's going to be a powerful strategy to put a survivor on a meat hook and bait other survivors to come for the save. Now, if they're a random team of survivors, they're going to be disjointed, they're going to come over uncoordinated, there might be 2 over by an accident when there could just be 1 and 2 on gens. It does cause a lot of pressure on survivors. This game is all about pressure. Dead by Daylight is a game all about pressure. When survivors are doing gens, they're putting pressure on the killer to stop that happening. When survivors are in a chase, it's pressure on the killer to get it down as fast as possible, right? When survivors unhook another survivor and heal, it's reversing the pressure again, and now the killer's in a tough spot. The killer's only ability in places where they can apply pressure is pushing people off generators, downing people, and having someone on a hook. Keeping someone on a hook and having it so at least one other person has to stop doing a generator and rescue is a golden opportunity to apply pressure as a killer. Now, if you walk away from that hook with blindness, so if you walk away from that hook to a generator that you don't know is being done and you just start patrolling the map and perusing around and seeing if you can find somebody, that's a stupid idea. But fundamentally, that's just an illogical idea. Like, you don't know where anybody is. Sure, you can go and try and find them, but if you're certain they're not going to get unhooked behind you pretty quickly, that's okay. If somebody is unhooked within your terror radius, the tunnel is something that is strategically valid and really, really rewarding. Because each survivor has about 60 seconds, right, on the first stage. They have a very long time before they hit second stage and then ultimately before they are dead on hook. So survivors they should use this. They should use this window and leave that survivor there. If somebody runs up to the hook and decides to unhook in your terror radius when you're nearby, knowing full well that you get a noise notification about that, and they'd know you're nearby because of the terror radius, turn around and punish it. Punish it all day. The reason that's happened is because there's 2 survivors on generators pushing the pressure on you that way, pushing the game-winning objective. The other survivor has intentions to unhook the guy as soon as possible, for no reason. There's no need to do that. They don't have to unhook that quickly. That person's got a lot of time. They could wait for you to leave the hook and be on another side of the map. They've decided not to, because what they're relying on and banking on is the fact that you'll feel a bit mean for going back there and taking advantage of an injured person that you've been notified has now been unhooked and is vulnerable for an attack. They've done that with you nearby knowingly. That's the teammate's fault. That's not your fault. That's the survivor's fault for unhooking. That was bad gameplay, bad strategy. The reason they did it is they wanted them off ASAP, get them healed ASAP, and apply 4-man gen pressure rather than 2. They feel a bit weak here. We need this person off the hook ASAP. They don't need that. It's selfish, and it's a silly mistake. So you punish that mistake, and it reverses pressure back on you. What you'll notice sometimes when you tunnel people like that is the other survivors will come off the generators too, and they'll start body blocking, and they'll start aggressively trying to body block and trying to direct your attention elsewhere and say, hey, stop that, come for me. And this can sometimes lead to you hurting someone else, downing them, and hooking them, and that's cool. If that happens, cool. But you've brought that pressure. You've made the survivors stop what they're doing and come over and focus on the pressure that you're applying instead, right? And that's why I talk about camping. Camping is a very viable strategy. I've waffled a bit. I get lost. I've waffled a bit. We've gone off script. It's okay. Chief point is don't disregard camping, tunneling, slugging, or whatever it may be for the edge that it gives you in psychological warfare and the pressure that it applies to survivors. Do not disregard it just because you might have heard through the grapevine it's toxic, it's disgusting behavior, it's bullying, it's, not allowed, whatever it may be, it's vilified. Don't disregard it because you're worried about how survivors are going to talk to you in the post-game chat, what messages you're going to receive. Survivors will complain about anything that they want to complain about. It'll never be an admission of the faults that they made. They'll always have a reason for why they lost. And if you don't camp or tunnel, and 3 people leave, they're never going to say, hey, thank you for not camping or tunneling, man. That was awesome. Like, shame that you lost, but, thanks for being a nice person. That's awesome. They might say that. Are you going to feel good about losing? No. I've had people come into my stream and they say, man, I just keep losing games. It's crazy. And then they're like, oh, I haven't got the heart to do this, or I haven't got the heart to do that. I haven't got the heart to do this. But I'm getting really stressed out. I hate losing. I'm getting sick of it. I just feel so overwhelmed. I'm like, You can't have both. You can't have both. You're going to have to be vicious. You're going to have to be merciless. You're going to have to be ruthless. Because when you lose, even if you're the most wholesome, fair player or fair killer, survivors are going to teabag, they're going to flashlight click, they're going to make noise notifications at the end game, they're going to wait until the last second of end game collapse, they're going to bag at the exit gate, all that stuff. They don't care. It doesn't change how they act. It doesn't change that they're enjoying the fact that they're winning. And a lot of times they put blinders onto what the killer's doing. They just see it as they've won and they're the best in the world. Not because the killer's been nice about how they're playing. You'll never get the gratitude. So why bother? So you're just putting strain on yourself to be this nice, fair player, and they're not respecting it, and they're making you feel like shit because you're losing a lot. You either want to win or you don't, and that's about all there is to it. Decide whether you want to win as killer, and if you decide you don't want to win, you just want everybody to have a good time, but then you start feeling like you're not having a good time because you're losing a lot and getting taunted about it and you know, insulted in the post-game chat, whatever, you've got to pick a lane. You have to pick a lane. It can't affect you losing if you're not trying to play to win. It doesn't make sense. My final point on this list, my final point, and I think one of the most important points, don't take things personally. Now, survivors do have a knack, especially when you're streaming. You notice how personal those things can be and how personal those actions are. They'll come by your stream and carry on insulting you when they've sort of seemed to be insulting in the game, right? Some people do attach personal, you know, feelings and attachment to their gameplay. It's kind of weird, but it also sets them up to be affected negatively, way more negatively, by the things that don't go so well in the game. So the best thing you could do as soon as possible is detach your personal feelings. When you're getting flashlight clicked, when you're getting teabagged, when someone's spamming noise notifications, when someone's trying to body block, when someone's trying to tell you to come on with a taunt, they're just playing and doing what they think is necessary to get the game in their advantage, distract the killer, bring attention to themselves, whether they want the chase or not, who knows, whether they're just being cocky and, you know, gloating that they think they're winning. They're just playing in their mind against a nameless killer. They don't know who you are. They don't know your name. They can't see it unless they're using cheat tools, right? They can't see it. They don't. You're just a killer. So we have an advantage of killer that we see survivor names, but the best thing to do is detach it and just think of it the same way. They're just survivors. They're just targets. They're just objectives. Your objective is to kill them, and that's as simple as it gets. Again, the fact that a lot of survivors do put personal attachment to that means that you can use that. You can use that to your advantage effectively with head nods, head shakes, hits on hooks to stir up the emotions and bring the psychological warfare to your advantage. You can do that as killer, and it's a very smart thing to do, but the thing that you need to do is detach yourself emotionally from it. It's quite hard to do. It's a very hard thing to train yourself to do when a game goes bad for a survivor. I want to give them the door. I want to give them a hatch. I feel mean. It's very hard to do. And to this day, I preach this, but I still struggle with it myself. But in most situations, what you have to remember, anytime you feel a bit mean, anytime you feel a bit personally affected emotionally, is that the survivors don't care. They don't give a shit about how you feel emotionally. When they're winning, they will not care if you feel sad. They will taunt, they will gloat, they will do everything in their power to make sure you know they won, and they will enjoy it. The same survivors who drop their item and beg for the hatch when they're losing are the same survivors that will click their flashlight at you when they're winning and call you a noob for using NOED. Like, there's no in between. I've seen it so many times where people tell me I can't bundle these people and paint them with the same brush, right? But I've seen it so many times from people where one time they win a game, wholesome, GG, WP or whatever, like great killer, great person, and then you beat them and they're like, fuck you, you neckbeard, why don't you get out your mum's basement? The same person. I've seen flip side personalities so fast. People hide behind this guise of wholesomeness. It's absolutely bizarre. You're playing a game where your objective is to kill your opponent. Your objective is to kill the survivors. So look at them as survivors. Look at what you can do, how you can bring the match into your favor. If you're playing for the win, play for the win and detach emotion, empathy, and everything else from it. It sounds harsh, but you have to, because a team of 4 survivors getting in your face doing the Puss in Boots cute eyes can really throw you astray. On the flip side of that, a team of survivors clicking their flashlights and spamming pallet vaults over and over again can also flip your emotions and make you play stupid and play like putty into their hands. As a final caveat, I will say, Look, sometimes survivors can get vicious in post-game chat and messages, and it can actually deter people from playing killer if they lose a few games and get messages saying GG, easy, haha, you suck, I broke your ankles, blah blah blah. It's going to happen. There's a variety of people out there, a variety of mental states, and a variety of people who think some things are a good idea to message after a game, right? So, if you're a person that you find yourself getting demotivated by post-game chat, you find yourself getting put off by the messages, or even worried about starting a killer game because you're worried already about what someone's going to say post-game when you suck or whatever, turn off post-game chat. Turn off the chat, turn off the feature, exit out immediately, don't read it. If you're on console, turn your privacy settings on, turn messages off, and just completely disregard all personal attachment. That will help you get better tremendously. It'll stop things sitting on your mind. It'll stop you psychologically psyching yourself out and beating yourself up because of these messages you're receiving. It's vicious. I've seen people threaten the most disgusting, vile, vicious, just disturbing stuff because they can. It's the internet, it's anonymity. Of course they're going to write some mad stuff, right? In their eyes, they can just say whatever they want, and they want to try and get into the person's head as much as possible after a loss especially, but after a win, it just makes them feel better. A lot of survivors, you have to imagine, do lose a lot of games. That frustration builds up, and then when they get a game that they win, it might be against yourself, and you've had a poor showing and you feel bad. They're so pent up that they just got a win. They're so excited and so happy. They wait the end game timer out, they spam noise notifications, and the post game chat, they go, hey, GG easy, because they might have had a couple of killers before that told them they suck. So it's just this back and forward tit for tat kind of thing, and if you're not ready for that and you don't enjoy those kind of messages and they do affect you and you do take that emotion with you into the next match or preempt that emotion from that possible message or possible insults at the end of the current match, then you just need to disable communications. Just turn messages off, turn post-game chat off. People are absolutely vicious, and they will try everything in their power to either make you feel bad after a victory or make you feel like you suck more than you actually do when you lose the game. Like, they'll just make you feel worse than you thought you could feel. It's diabolical. There's no changing it. There's no fixing it. We can sit here and rally and say, hey, let's stop being mean to each other. It's never going to happen. There's new people come to the game all the time. They're sitting in Discord with their friends, spewing this vile stuff and regurgitating the same crap in the endgame chat and in messages. They just see it as how to be. If you don't like that, and generally you find that puts you off games and puts a lot of worry on your chest when you're playing killer, I would recommend you to turn it off, because it's going to happen. I don't like saying that it's going to happen. I'm not sitting here going, oh, it's like Call of Duty lobbies back in the day. You wouldn't hang. Like, I'm not saying like, oh, this is Dead by Daylight. Welcome, bitch. You know, like, it's nothing like that. It's just, it's going to happen. I don't like saying it's going to happen, but I've played it long enough. It continues to happen. People don't like losing, and people love winning. So both sides of it, for some reason, they will try and make you feel bad. It's just how it is. They want to insult you in any way they can. I don't know why. It's just the way it is. I wish it wasn't, but you need to be prepared for that. So if that does affect you, turn those communications off, and you'll be way better off for it. Alright guys, thank you so much for checking out the video. As usual, smack the thumbs up, man. It helps the algorithm so much. Share these tips with your friends if you guys are looking to get into killer as well. If you think they might find the tips helpful, let me know if you think some of them were just absolute bullshit and you disagree, or let me know if they helped you at all, or let me know if it's something you never thought of. Hopefully we can shed some light on some new things for you and help ease you into playing the hardest role in the game on Dead by Daylight. And hopefully we'll see more killers out there in the fog, man, or maybe even catch you in my stream chat. See you guys next time in the next video. Thanks for checking it out. As always, thank you very much for watching.